This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak dies aged 91. We're bringing you the latest updates on the COVID-19 outbreak. And warring parties in Libya pull out of UN-sponsored Geneva peace talks. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers and I'll be with you for the next hour. But joining me for the latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Senegal launches its first large-scale wind power project. And traders at the Uganda-Rwanda border suffer as relations between the two nations remain strained. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. Well, we begin with our top story for tonight. Egypt's ousted former President Hosni Mubarak has died. The country's state television says the 91-year-old died weeks after undergoing surgery. Mubarak served as Egypt's fourth president. He ruled for 30 years. He was ousted by the military following mass protests against his rule in 2011. He was then jailed for nearly 6 years for conspiring to murder 239 demonstrators during the 18-day popular revolt. His removal paved way for Egypt's first free election. Egypt's presidency and armed forces have mourned him as a hero for his role in the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. The former Air Force officer will be given a military funeral. Well, for more on that story, we're now joined by Adel Muruhi in Cairo. Thank you so much for joining us, Adel. Adel, tell us more about the announcement by the presidency and also what happens next.
The Egyptian presidency has declared a state of mourning across the country, and the statement is a statement of condolences given in Mubarak's memory and to his family. It's a recognition of the former president's effort and sort of a disregard to the political changes that has forced Mubarak to step down in 2011. The Egyptian presidency highlighted the status of the former president as the commander of the Air Force in a war, the 1973 war, that has regained honor and dignity to Egypt and the Arab world. That's a quote from the statement itself. And it's a status of what the Egyptian presidency perceives the former presidency. What is happening next is a military funeral that will be held on Wednesday morning, and world leaders and delegations from across the world are expected to be arriving to Cairo on Wednesday. The funeral or the burial proceedings will be taking place on Wednesday, while another funeral service will be open for the public participation in a military established mosque on Friday.
Adel, just tell us about what the mood in Egypt right now is and how the ordinary Egyptians are reacting to the news of Mubarak's death.
So in general, many are mourning Mubarak. We can say that this is the sense among the majority of Egyptians from what is appearing on social media and from some interviews with people in the street we've also held here in Cairo. Even those who are critical of the former president and those who have been criticizing the last decade, specifically supporting the uprising in 2011 that was held against Mubarak and was basically calling for better lives and calling for end of corruption and Mubarak's rule. Even those, they still grieve the death of the former president. Generally, he is noted in Egypt and is recognized as a very well-decorated war hero, and for that, for being the reason for part of the reason for Egypt to regain its occupied territories from Israel and for Egypt to once again have a sovereign state with full authority over its entire mainland. That is something that it appears nothing Mubarak has done could wipe it or in any case affect that notion and the significance of that to the Egyptian people in general. So those who support him and many of those who used to stand against him in 2011, they all want to take a pause, announce a state of mourning, and wish or pray for mercy for the former president. There are those, of course, who are still quite critical to the former president and do not really show any signs of empathy or compassion with the former president's death, but we cannot say that these are any significant, they don't have any significant presence, basically.
Well, Adel, it's been 9 years since the revolution that swept Mubarak out of office. Have the aspirations of that revolution been achieved?
Well, in a sense of political change to the leadership of Mubarak and his regime, we are seeing some changes. Still, the military establishment enjoys great support from the Egyptian public, and therefore nothing politically or no major political changes could be seen if we compare the political status today and back to Mubarak's regime. There are, of course, changes, but not as significant. Economically, people would refer to Mubarak's era as an era with better prices, better economic status. Egypt's foreign debt, for example, was much lower than it is today, and in that regard, maybe, which is one of the main calls for the 2011 uprising, is call for bread or better living, the power for people to live well, economically mainly. That is, Egypt is undergoing major development, but people do not still feel the returns of that development yet.
Thank you so much for that, Adel. Adel Al-Marouchi joining us live from Cairo. Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim now takes a look back at Hosni Mubarak's life.
He's had an eventful life and a controversial career. Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, born on May 4th, 1928, first rose to prominence in 1973. He was considered a war hero for playing a pivotal role in the 1973 war to liberate Sinai from Israeli occupation.
Vice President Hosni was the Air Force commander. They respect him a lot in Israel because the lesson was very painful.
Mubarak was appointed as vice president by Anwar al-Sadat in 1975. In 1981, he became president of Egypt at a critical time after the assassination of Sadat during a military parade.
I swear by the great God that I will sincerely abide by the Republican rule and respect the Constitution and the law, and to completely protect the well-being of the people and to protect the independence of our nation and its land.
Mubarak managed to steady the ship in Egypt and ruled the country for over 30 years. His reign was known to be one of peace and stability, but it was marred by growing corruption and abuse of power. And in 2011, the people revolted against Mubarak in what was known as the Arab Spring. After 12 days of demonstrations, Mubarak abdicated from power.
في هذه الظروف العصيبة
In these tough times that the country is going through, President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak decided to abdicate from the position of the President of the Republic and assign the higher military council to run the affairs of the country.
وكلف المجلس الأعلى للقوات المسلحة لإدارة شؤون البلاد والله الموفق والمستعان.
Mubarak, his two sons, and political aides were taken to court for numerous charges. He spent 7 years in custody. In 2017, Mubarak was acquitted from most charges and released from jail. In spite of the critical end to his reign, Mubarak was commended for not fighting the popular uprising. He therefore avoided civil war and bloodshed. Mubarak also refused all offers to live abroad after the uprising and remained in his country to face the consequences.
Egypt will remain forever strong. Its well-being will remain my one and utmost aim for however long I live. From the day I was born, throughout my life and until I die, Egypt will remain my dear country. It will not leave me, and I will not leave it until I die.
Mubarak spent the remaining years of his life with his family, away from the limelight.
We now bring you the latest on the COVID-19 outbreak. China has recorded over 77,000 confirmed cases. More than a third of them have now recovered. The country reported over 500 new cases on Monday, most of them in Hubei province, where the outbreak began. Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Henan are now the next worst hit provinces, each with more than 1,200 cases. 32 other countries have reported infections with more than 2,500 cases and 41 deaths. South Korea has confirmed over 900 cases. Italy has the largest tally outside Asia with more than 200 cases. Iran is the worst hit country in the Middle East with 95 cases. Japan has reported 854 confirmed cases, most of whom were aboard a quarantined cruise ship. A fourth person who has died in Japan was one of the vessel's passengers. Italy has confirmed more than 280 cases and 7 deaths. A team of experts from the WHO and the European Centre for Disease Control and Prevention are there to support containment efforts. Our correspondent Natalie Carney told us earlier how they're assessing the current situation.
The team arrived on Monday evening and they are expected to help their Italian authorities or their Italian counterparts in the areas of clinical management, infection protection and control, as well as surveillance and risk communication. They do say at this particular current time with these cases, the focus really is on limiting further human-to-human transmission. The rapid increase here in Italy is very much a concern, not only to Italy, but to the World Health Organization and as you've just heard, to the European Union as a whole. And the WHO say they are taking this increase here in Italy very seriously. Based on the current data, however, they also note that most of the current cases that have been identified here in Italy, 4 out of 5 of them, the majority of them, are showing mild to no symptoms, which could pose even further challenges down the road in trying to contain and confine the spread of this virus. Italian authorities, of course, have also implemented their own prevention measures over the weekend. The Italian Prime Minister announced emergency protections in 11 communities around the north of the country, which are effectively now under lockdown, affecting about 50,000 inhabitants.
The COVID-19 outbreak is having huge impact in Western Asia too. Iran's resources are coming under severe strain. Iran has announced 16 fatalities out of 95 cases, among them the country's deputy health minister who has tested positive for COVID-19. The outbreak in Iran seems to be affecting the general region. Its neighbor Kuwait has now reported its 8th case, all patients who had recently spent time in Iran. Meanwhile, Iraq, Bahrain, Oman, and Afghanistan have all announced several cases. Again, they are believed to have arrived from Iran. At a press conference earlier today, a leading Chinese expert said it was too early to say whether the new coronavirus would become a normal occurrence. According to him, however, at this stage, he did not think that would happen.
COVID-19 might exist for a long time without another major outbreak. What's imperative is to keep it under control. So could it become a normal annual occurrence, like the flu? I don't think that's likely to happen.
A joint mission led by the World Health Organization has praised China's efforts in controlling the COVID-19 epidemic. Health experts from the world body and China have returned to Beijing from Wuhan, where the outbreak began. Wu Guishu has more on their week-long mission.
Apart from Wuhan, the 25 experts and health professionals from the WHO and China also visited Beijing, Guangzhou, and Sichuan province. They talked to officials, frontline medical workers, and the public. Dr. Bruce Aylward, Senior Advisor of Director General of the WHO, says China has undertaken aggressive efforts in fighting the virus and have been proven to be effective.
But what we found was, even though every province was suffering outbreaks and was getting infected, the governors were prioritizing the movement of medical teams and PPE out to Hubei and Wuhan. And that's a very important message for the rest of the world about how we work in the kind of solidarity and collaborative action that's going to be needed to beat this virus. And it's the opinion of the joint mission, after looking at this very, very closely and in different ways, that there's no question that China's bold approach to the rapid spread of this new respiratory pathogen has changed the course of what was a rapidly escalating and continues to be deadly epidemic.
The WHO expert says China's efforts have reduced at least 10,000 or even tens of thousands of possible infected cases. Some of these efforts can be recommended to the rest of the world.
We do not yet have preventative drugs or developed vaccines, so the non-pharmaceutical measures such as social distancing and self-protecting measures adopted by the general public have changed the course of the epidemic. We believe the earlier the better.
The joint mission found that even though people of all ages can be infected by the virus, the average age of the infected patients is 51. Even as over 3,000 medical staff have been infected, new confirmed cases are on the decline.
So, first of all, the purpose of the mission right now was to look at what works. I'm not avoiding the question, but the purpose was what works. We're in a global emergency. The single biggest lesson is speed. Speed is everything. But what worries me most is, has the rest of the world learned the lesson of speed?
Dr. Bruce Aylward says the risk from China is declining, and China's experience will contribute to the global medical community's knowledge in tackling the virus. As the government brings the economy and life gradually back to normal, control measures will gradually be eased. However, the battle with the virus is not over, at least not just yet. Wu Guoxiu, CGTN, Beijing.
Meanwhile, African countries are increasing their efforts towards being adequately prepared for COVID-19. This as the World Health Organization expresses concern about new cases outside China. Earlier, we spoke with Dr. Michael Yao from the WHO.
About Africa preparedness, we can say that progress has been made. If we take the first element, that is appropriate screening at the entry point, most of the high priority countries in terms of link with China, as well as flux of passengers, all these countries have set up an appropriate screening measure, as well as isolation. We have also progress made about laboratory confirmation. As we are speaking today, we have 29 countries that can perform the coronavirus test. We had 2 countries 2 weeks ago, so a huge progress has been made in this area. Where we need to continue is to continue sensitizing communities, raising awareness on what the disease is, for easy detection of events within the community in case these events are not detected within the system in place at entry point and hospital base. We need also to ensure that we have treatment capacity. We can see in China that we can have quite a huge number of cases that require intensive care, and we know that this capacity is limited in Africa.
Over 100 Ugandan students are still in Wuhan province, China, the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak. Some, though, have been able to return home to Uganda. CGTN's Leon Seanga caught up with one of them.
It's been 14 days since Tabula Emmanuel returned home. The software engineering student is one of hundreds of Ugandans that left China after the coronavirus started.
This is something that came without any of us expecting it. It hit us. We heard of it way back in December because we were organizing a reunion as Ugandans. We were supposed to meet in Wuhan, ironically, because Wuhan is more of a central place.
More than 100 Ugandan students are stuck in Wuhan. The Uganda government says it will not be evacuating any students from China. Instead, it will be offering financial support to those still living in the affected province. The government says it will dispatch about $60,000 for their welfare.
We got a reassurance that the Chinese government will do all it takes to ensure that the Ugandan students are well taken care of. Students in the university halls of residence are being provided for food by the universities.
Health ministry officials in Uganda insist on vigilance, especially at the country's international airport. For Tabula, while he may be home safe, his friends 5,000 miles away are in his thoughts. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
More news making headlines after the break, including more than 7 million Zimbabweans in need of food assistance. And we find out why conservationists in South Africa are pushing for a ban on human contact with wildlife.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. What's the latest on the ongoing Libyan conflict? Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has confirmed the death of 2 Turkish troops in Libya. Turkey has been providing military support to the Tripoli-based government of national accord, which has been trying to fend off an offensive by Khalifa Haftar's forces to the east. Last year, the two sides signed a military cooperation deal. Turkey has since sent troops there.
Dear friends, we have 2 martyrs of ours there in Libya. I have now given the numbers.
A ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is in place after 2 days of exchange of fire with Israel. The truce went into effect Monday. Israel began the hostilities on Sunday when it shot dead a member of the Islamic Jihad armed faction in Gaza. The Palestinian group responded by firing rockets and mortar rounds into southern Israel, causing no injuries. Israel then launched new attacks on Gaza and targets in Syria. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says 15 Palestinians were wounded, 2 of them seriously. Countries that share Africa's river Nile should stop bickering about its water, but instead look out for new sources. That's the message from Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni in his address to the 20th African Water Association Summit. CGTN's Michael Baleka reports from Kampala.
It's the longest waterway in the world. How to share it is a source of controversy for countries along the Nile. Rapidly growing population and climate change are putting pressure on the natural resource. The Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says one solution is for Africa to look to other underutilized sources like the Congo River for their water needs.
What we should do is to talk with Congo and help Congo to deal with their problems, security and so on, so that we can see how Congo can help the other parts of Africa with this huge water, which is being taken by the ocean, and the ocean has no need for fresh water.
The Nile flows through 10 countries. The development of dams and irrigation systems have added fuel to centuries-long debates over who should control it. But it's not just the Nile countries in Africa struggling with the water crisis.
We have in the continent relatively limited access to basic water supply and sanitation services, with some countries in Africa having access to basic water services for less than 50% of the population, and Africa compares not so well with other regions in the world.
The World Bank says Africa has made significant progress in accessing water and sanitation, but the continent faces severe challenges. Water is a valuable natural resource vital for life, development, and the environment. But the UN World Health Organization warns that by 2025, half of the world's population will be living in water-stressed areas. And the situation is more critical because of high levels of pollution in the available water resources.
The continent is undergoing rapid development. We're seeing industries developing. We're seeing things happen that we're not monitoring. And these are the things that are going to come back to haunt us if we don't address these in our monitoring systems.
Figures from the Africa Water Association show that more than 320 million people on the continent lack access to safe drinking water, and poor water quality is responsible for 70 to 80% of diseases in Africa. The hope is that the Water Conference in Kampala will present new breakthroughs and innovations to help improve access to clean and safe water. Michael Balekesi, GTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Zimbabwe is now one of the world's least food-secure countries. More than half of its 15 million people are in need of food assistance. That's according to the United Nations World Food Programme. The plight of Zimbabweans has become more acute in the wake of the worst drought in decades. Here's Tuli Shabalala with more.
Zimbabwe is facing its worst hunger crisis in a decade. Close to 7.7 million people are food insecure. The country's economy is in crisis as inflation has hit 500%. The increasingly unreliable rainy season is affecting subsistence farmers who grow maize. It's a tough situation for residents in Munzi district, northeast of the capital Harare.
The life we are living is very tough. There is too much hunger. On top of that, my husband is crippled.
The World Food Programme is doubling aid assistance in a bid to reach those hardest hit by the crisis.
As climate change is intensifying globally, Zimbabwe and indeed all of Southern Africa is a prime example of the people suffering most at the hands of climate change.
5.5 million people in the countryside and 2.2 million in the urban areas need help. Acute malnutrition has risen to 3.6%.
It is targeting the most vulnerable groups, the elderly, whom we expect are not able to work in the fields to harvest enough food to take them throughout the year.
1,000 people in this district are receiving monthly food rations from the World Food Programme. For the first time in several days, residents here will be cooking sanza, a staple made from maize meal.
Today I'm so happy to receive food. In recent days we have been going to bed with empty stomachs.
The WFP and its partners aim to assist 3.5 million people across Zimbabwe with food until April. By May, villagers hope to harvest their crops. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Human interaction with wild animals has come under the spotlight in South Africa. Local tourism body SATSA, which represents a large part of the industry, is calling for an outright ban on human contact with wild animals. Activists believe that it harms the welfare of animals and that the government should do more to protect them. CGTN's Julie Shaya visited a wildlife sanctuary to find out more.
The Chukani Wildlife Sanctuary in Plettenberg Bay does not allow its majestic wildcats to have any contact with humans. Cuddling, petting and walking with lions, tigers and other felines is allowed in South Africa, but activists are calling for laws to put an end to this.
We take people out on an educational tour and actually tell them about the animals specifically at Chukani, but also give them education about wild animals in captivity and wild animals in the wild, but educate them on how animals should be treated and not just use touching and cuddling a wild animal as the education, because that's got absolutely no conservation value, it's got no education value, so it's going to force places to actually do the right thing and move away from touching, move away from cuddling wild animals, which is completely unnatural for them in the first place.
Wildlife populations have been shrinking for centuries as natural habitats diminish with urbanization. Hunting is still legal in countries like South Africa, and poaching is threatening to wipe out many species. South African tourism body SATSA has stopped its members from offering intimate or playful activities with these animals.
We have wildlife interactions that are not deemed ethical and responsible by the general public in the rest of the world. There are large tour operator companies that will not support you if you allow interaction in any way or form. South Africa has to sit up and realize that we have to be part of that. We have to say, you know, we will be more eco-conscious, we will be more eco-friendly. Take care of the earth that we're living in, take care of the animals. And I think that that will help us grow in the long run, basically.
In order for an elephant or a monkey, say for instance, to perform for your pleasure, it has to be trained, and in order to train it, you have to deprive it of food and you have to hurt it. My hope is that the powers that be of our country see the bigger picture and realize that we have to protect the gift of nature and the animals that live in our country, and hopefully they make stronger legislation that can be enforced.
This wildlife sanctuary is working hard to improve the lives of animals and ensure the long-term conservation of South Africa's wildlife, and is pinning its hopes on international travelers to make responsible tourism choices. Julie Shire, CGTN, Plettenberg Bay, South Africa.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more news. For now, let's get the latest in business with Uche.
Thanks, Hannah. Coming up on Africa Live Biz. Senegal launches its first large-scale wind power project. And traders at the Uganda-Rwanda border suffer as relations between the two nations remain strained.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
governments try to overcome the spread of COVID-19, economists are saying that the impact of the epidemic on China's economy is limited. They argue that the world's second biggest economy will be back on track as early as the second quarter of this year. With the details, here's CGTN's Chao Mgono with the story.
As a way of taking control measures against COVID-19, China has imposed some restrictions. As a result, its consumer price index slipped to 5.4% in January. The index is the world's second biggest economy's highest level in nearly 9 years. It's seen as an economic fallout from the virus outbreak.
Definitely, if you close a shop, if you close an industry, automatically it will create shortage somewhere. And once it creates shortage somewhere, inflation will also increase. And that's why we're seeing also in China, inflation has been going up. But the good news is that is a very temporary phenomenon, because once the epidemic is taken care of adequately, it's very easy to resume production.
Since economies are highly integrated, COVID-19 does not only impact China's domestic market. The epidemic is disrupting supply chains and upsetting markets globally, particularly across Asia and Europe. Nonetheless, businesses are resuming production, and this is a sigh of relief.
The traders are the ones who are most frustrated, because they are used to make frequent trips to China to buy their commodities to come to sell in the domestic market. So those are the ones who are waiting eagerly to see when is this virus going to be cleared. Everybody is eager, waiting to see that they resume trade relationship with China as soon as possible.
Professor Humphrey Moshi says the world's confidence in China is far from a shake-up. Chombono, CGTN.
Well, let's head to Senegal now. The country has inaugurated the first large-scale wind farm in West Africa. Now, the facility will supply nearly a sixth of the country's power when it reaches full capacity later this year. With the wind farm, Senegal is also expected to draw about 30% of its energy from renewable energy sources. Here's CGTN's Laura Walubango with more.
This wind farm will provide the first ever utility-scale wind power in West Africa. The project is located about 100 kilometers from the capital, Dakar. It's part of efforts carried out by President Macky Sall as he seeks to meet the demand for energy without making the climate situation worse.
Here we have an energy mix that is on the move. And this energy mix will allow Senegal to be counted among the countries that respect the environment. To date, we have nearly 22% renewable energy and therefore clean energy. And at the end of this Taiba and Ndiaye wind power plant, we will be at 32%. From 2022, that is to say in 2 years precisely, Senegal will switch from gas to electricity. That is from gas to power. This should allow our country to be one of the few that will use almost 90% of clean energy.
The Taiba Ndiaye has been built by British renewable power company Lekela. The company also has wind farms in South Africa, Egypt, and an upcoming one in Ghana. Built on an area of 41 hectares, the wind farm has 16 turbines generating up to 50 megawatts. The first turbine was completed last year with a substation last October. Each turbine, standing 117 meters tall with blades of 61.7 meters, will produce around 3.45 megawatts. Experts believe this power plant would power Senegal for the next 20 years and prevent the emission of 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide annually.
This park allows us to better expand our generating fleet by diversifying sources. To date, we have fuel, hydroelectricity, solar, and we have just installed the wind turbine which completes the energy mix. We are going to dump all this production into the interconnected network which brings together Mauritania, Senegal and Mali. Last week we started the interconnection test with the Ivory Coast, which will allow us to develop greater robustness compared to our network and its capacity to absorb renewable energies.
Senegal aims to thrive as a key player in the oil and natural gas industry by making energy work for its economy. Its first solar plant came online 3 years ago and has since built several more. Laura Walabengo, CGTN.
Meanwhile, traders at Uganda's border with Rwanda continue to make losses due to the closure of that border. Katuna border has been closed for over 12 months now, following diplomatic tensions between the two nations. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga with more on the impact of that closure.
Counting her losses, Deborah Charisima is a trader at the Uganda-Rwanda border. She's fighting hard to stay in business.
I used to sell like 5 sacks, 6 sacks, but now I can even finish the whole week without selling even 50 kilograms.
The cost of doing business here remains high. While some traders have opted to close shop, others struggle to keep afloat. Traders here used to sell their goods to Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi. But since the government of Rwanda restricted the movement of people and goods across Katuna border, few people are buying their goods. They are now asking the Uganda government to support them financially.
If the president could assist us or the government and bring some money in that circle, so that those people, we can give them a chance who took our money and who failed to pay back our money. If the president could bring more money from that circle, then they come for another loan, they keep paying slowly by slowly, maybe it could be better.
Local leaders are urging the president to reach an agreement soon so that the business between the two countries can resume.
We want to make an appeal to the presidents that peace must be really championed and ushered into this country if we have to have a meaningful, peaceful collaboration.
But this could take another 45 days until the next round of talks. Hopefully then, the leaders may agree to reopen the border and businesses like that of Charisima will flourish again. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kabale, Western Uganda.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, more than 600 shops operated by foreigners in Ghana still remain shut. That's months after a local trade union pushed for their closure. All this coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. We'll see you top of the hour. For now, let's take a short break and return. More news.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, welcome back. Nia Matlango is a young Johannesburg-based South African artist who uses charcoal drawing and paint to create both surrealist and representational art. She works primarily with charcoal, but also digital illustrations. Since showing her artwork in 2017, Matlango has shown regularly at art galleries domestically and made her fair debut at the Latitudes Art Fair, an art fair for contemporary art from the African continent. CGTN's Elisenta Jamela brings us more.
Neo Matlango is relatively new in the art industry, but she's already making waves. She immediately points out that she's actually been at it her whole life.
Yeah, I knew I could draw all my life, but I didn't have the courage to do anything about it. I didn't have the I think it needs a level of faith to do it, you know. I didn't have that. Like, I knew I had a talent, but I was always scared to do something about it, you know. So, yeah, like 2017, I was like, I only have one life, come on. Let's do this thing, like, it's do or die, you know what I mean?
The young artist uses a variety of mediums to produce her work.
So I use mostly charcoal because I love the medium, I love how messy it is, I love the contrast of it, I love what you can do with it. And then I also paint a little, and I also do illustrations. Yeah, and I draw. I mostly draw. I don't consider myself a painter.
Newa's work has evolved to become about nuances of Black love and how relationship dynamics look through the lens of our current social media.
I draw and I do illustrations, and most of my work is about connection, like human connection. My work started off as being about human connection on a social media level. And then I decided that, no, let me just dig deeper in this human connection topic, because I was just interested in how human dynamics have changed since the introduction of cell phones and all of that, and how it affected our mental health, how it affects how we see ourselves, the way we compare ourselves to each other.
As a new age artist, I wondered and asked her how the traditional art industry views her work.
I think when they see my work, they see something new, because I'm not talking about things that other artists are talking about. I'm not like a political activist kind of artist, you know. I feel like that's not my fight. Let the people who fight that, but that's not me.
But she doesn't shy away from making political activist statements, like when she decided to use an image of a young Black girl on a 2-rand coin. Newa made history by becoming the youngest person to design a 2-rand coin for South Africa as part of the commemorations for 25 years of democracy.
So that was a very interesting project, because the South African men contacted me saying that they want me to design coins. I didn't know how many, I didn't know which ones, you know. So we had little secret meetings. So then they chose 2 of my works, and then, yeah, I ended up designing 2 2-rand coins. And one of the themes was the right to education, and the other one is children's rights, right? So with the children's right coin, I was like, I've never seen a Black girl on a coin before, you know? And I was like, wow, come on, let's do this. So I put a Black girl on the coin, you know, because I've never seen a female on any of our currencies.
Newa has been part of many group exhibitions and is now ready to host her solo exhibition. Yulisa Njamala for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Your sport news coming after the break. Here's what you can expect. Senegal begins preparations for 2021 Handball World Cup.